So I've made a list of things that I'd like to get through.
Oh, I think we'll certainly make a significant dent in it.
Good. That's good. Good.
You want to start with the blowjob?
For 31 years, my husband would climb on top, do the business, roll off, put his pyjamas on and go back to sleep. I've never had an orgasm. And yes, in fact, if we do this, you will only be the second man I have ever had sex with. Oh, God.
Now, Nancy.
This is crazy.
Nancy?
It's terrible. It's wrong.
Nancy?
Yes?
Let's go to bed.
Okay. What's the oldest person you've ever done it with?
82.
82?
Yeah.
82?
Nancy.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit better now.
I've been very bad today, miss. You might have to keep me behind after class.
Okay, stop it.
No, I know, miss, but we could just...
Safe word, safe word.
We don't have a safe word.
What about you, the real you?
I'm whatever you want me to be.
I don't doubt it. I've never done anything interesting or remarkable in my life. This is it. I see my friends shriveling up over the years. Sorry.
Nancy, everyone needs something different. I don't judge my clients unless they're total arseholes.
You sound like some sort of sex saint. Are you real? I have felt more alive in this last month than I can ever remember. You're the only adventure I've ever had. Oh, shit. Oh, God. Well, what am I going to say? Hello, sorry, I can't talk now because I've booked this man for the night and I'm trying to perform oral sex on him.
I just don't have to say that.
Good Luck to You is the new film from Sophie Hyde, who's been my favourite director for a long time. I first noticed Life in Movement, then I fell in love with 52 Tuesdays, and I loved Animals. Sorry, Sophie, I haven't seen The Hunting yet, but I'm going to get around to it, I promise. So
You're doing great.
thanks for joining us on Screen Watching.
Thanks for having me. Really pleasure to be here.
We can't talk about this beautiful film of yours without addressing the central theme of intimacy. When reflecting upon the experience you had on the film, what thoughts and moments does the word intimacy bring to mind?
I mean, I think it was the thing that first drew me to this. Well, let's be honest, actually. The thing that drew me was a great concept about two people trying to have good sex, and Emma Thompson being attached to it, of course. But then the idea of two people in one room meant that we were going to go in and explore what intimacy is. Like, there was no way you were going to get away from that in the film. And certainly that's the thing that was interesting to me, is like, what is intimacy? Like, how does it shift and change, and how can it be found between two people who might not expect to become intimate with each other, even if one of them has brought the other one in to get, physically intimate with the other? Like, how will they actually open something up between themselves, and find that connection, I suppose, and intimacy. Sure. So I think of that. And then I also think of the way that we made it, which was incredibly intimate, and that we weren't mirroring the story, because it's not the story that's the same, but there was an experience of getting to know each other and opening up that had to happen to make a film like this, that goes on. And so that kind of intimacy was both on and off screen.
And I guess we'll get to the physicalities of the sex scenes later on, but the portraying sex working in a very sex positive way is fairly unique in cinema. This life choice is very much Leo's to make. It needed to be, the narrative needed to be his journey as much as it was Nancy's, I would assume. Without depth to Leo, it very much risks being that hooker with a heart of gold cliche again, wasn't it?
Look, we've seen very limited stories of sex work on screen, and those have fit into a couple of tropes in the main cases, which are like somebody that requires saving, or a kind of romantic outcome between the client and the sex worker, or somebody that's had like deep sort of trauma and is like there only because of that sort of thing. For me, what was important, yes, I didn't want to, even though Leo, the character, is coming in to service the character of Nancy in the ways that she wants, I didn't want a film where the character of Leo was servicing only the story of Nancy. Like, Leo also had to be a fully formed human, even if we only saw one part of that, because we're in a hotel room all the time, you know? We had to feel like there was more going on for him in his life outside of that frame as well, you know? And so it was important to me that there was a version of sex work that is alternate, because, you know, we spoke with a lot of sex workers and the experiences they're having is vastly different from each other. You can't just tell one singular story and repeat that same story over and over again. Many of the sex workers we worked with, you know, like, you know, autonomous, they do a great job. They have unique skills that they've, like, you know, honed over time, and they take great pleasure and satisfaction in being good at what they do. And that's something I really wanted for Leo, is like to watch a character who's trying very hard to be good at his job. I really enjoy. Yeah. Do I think he ever leans into the hooker with a heart of gold thing? I mean, I just said it, but I wouldn't use that word.
Yeah.
But he's done a lot of work on himself, Leo, to be good at working with somebody opposite him in the room.
Yeah.
I think he has really clear boundaries, and he maintains those boundaries. And I think he genuinely believes that it's possible to help people shift things in themselves, you know, through intimacy and physical intimacy combined. Yeah. But I don't think he's perfect, you know, and I think he's also he's doing his job. It's not like he's doing this out of the goodness of his heart.
I'm going to go off my script here. I'm going to be frank about the film. It was a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed and wonderfully acted and beautifully told, but it was a movie that I kept thinking back on having watched it. And I started to think to myself, it made me question how I viewed the portrayal of sex workers in society. It made me think of what the film would have been like in a gender reversal role, if this was, you know, Hugh Grant with Lily James or something like that, or, you know, that sort of casting. Excuse me. And one thing I guess I'd like you to comment on is the role that class and privilege plays in these characters' lives. And maybe, excuse me, maybe that springs to mind because it's a British film, and she's a well-to-do white woman who says she can't afford this, but she has the room and him a few times. Is there a social dynamic at play that was addressed in building backstories for these characters?
Great question. There are so many things going on in terms of power dynamics in the film that are not necessarily explicitly raised, right? But there are, you know, at times each of them is more powerful than the other, or has more control, you know, I think, than the other. And, you know, Leo's young and he's experienced. Nancy feels she's old and inexperienced, you know, but at the same time, she's paying for this. So she has a position of privilege, you know, like a power dynamic shift there. She feels that she's seen more of the world because she's old as well. So, you know, there is a kind of class dynamic for sure, where she might not even notice this, a character like Nancy, of course. It's not a conscious thing, but Leo will notice this. Leo will really be very aware of his, that he's a mixed race man coming into a room chosen by a white woman, even if Nancy isn't aware of that, isn't thinking about that as an idea. And so, and also that he's very tall and like physically he could overpower her if he wanted to, all of those things, you know. To me, that was what was interesting, and the difference between the two characters. And we don't always want to be like having everything of that in kind of the words. We don't want them to talk about that all the time. Sure. But that was certainly where we were thinking of it in terms of where we were coming from with character, do you know? So there are moments like where Nancy says, I've never touched anyone like you before. And Leo says, like me. And she says physically fit, like buff, like a model. But in that moment, Daryl and I both spoke about for Leo, he's like, oh no, is this where it's going to be about me being a black man?
Yeah.
You know? And like I think those conversations and those questions should be there for the audience and are there for different audiences at different times. When it comes to race and, when it comes to class, I struggled when I was casting this I kept looking at actors that were Australian, that were Irish, that were Welsh, that were Scottish, and not because there weren't brilliant actors in England. Like, there were so many great people we were looking at, but the people that really stood out for me felt like they came from elsewhere. And I think that's partly because there is such that strong kind of class thing going on in England. You know, they're so full on, and they understand it at such a micro level that I don't. And so I always had this feeling that I was going to cast someone and everyone would read something that I wasn't reading into it. The Brits would, you know?
Yeah.
And one of the things I loved about Daryl was his Irishness, and he kind of seems like he comes from a place that we're not exactly sure what his life might have been, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful.
But there's so much we could talk about with that. Only
yeah, well, there is. Yes. And I don't know if I want to draw you on the gender sort of parody there, or what that, if that's your role to even comment on that in the nature of the film. But imagine a film like that with Hugh Grant and Zendaya, let's say, that kind of casting.
Well, let's imagine it properly, which is an older teacher has lived a life of dissatisfaction. He's never had an orgasm.
Yeah.
And he hires a young sex worker who's really in control of her life, who's decided to take kind of the shame that's been put on her and reframe it and find a way to like help people experience pleasure, and to kind of do that in a way that feels like a vocation. And she goes in and works with him to feel comfortable, to even touch her, to do all these things. I think that would be a great move.
Sure.
But if we did it in the role reversal, we wouldn't do it like that, because we think it's quite ordinary for men to have younger women, actually.
Yeah.
We think it's like, it's almost invisible in many ways, you know? And the power thing is just so different, because women's, like, the absence of pleasure in women's lives, or the absence of that being an important thing, and their desires being important, is really strong. And it's not as strong for men, you know?
Great answer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think.
No, great answer. Let's talk about Emma Thompson securing her talent in a role that needed one of the world's finest actresses, for a role that many of the world's finest actresses may not want to take. Tell me about crafting the character of Nancy with her.
The amazing thing about Emma, I keep looking over there because there's a picture of her on the wall, so you see me just looking at her. The amazing thing about Emma is that she understood the character of Nancy so thoroughly when I first met her. She knew this character, she knew that she wanted to put her on the screen, and she felt that this was a character that would always be on the side of a leading character, wouldn't even necessarily have a name in a script, you know, would do that, would never be doing the interesting thing, would be next to the person doing the interesting thing, you know. And to make her be a character that makes a very interesting choice, and then we can unravel who she is really exciting. So Em was completely committed to that, and she understood Nancy like heart and soul, like in her bones. And so I always felt very comfortable with the role of Nancy because of Emma. We changed the story and where the story went with Nancy, but the actual original character is very similar to the first draft that I read, which sounded like Emma. Like I could only imagine Emma in it, you know, or like sounded like a version of Emma, because she's actually hugely different from Nancy Stokes. But in terms of crafting it, what I think Emma and I came together on was like, how do we physically want to use, like, how do we want to show this story to the world in a way that can be funny and delightful and all of those things that we want it to be, but also go under the surface to really explore what's going on for Nancy about her own body and the shame that exists, that's been like, you know, that she's been completely soaked in, like all women and most people. And so that was a kind of uncovering of like, where's the tone, and how serious are we going to get, and at what point, and how physical are we going to get, and at what point. And And so a lot of our conversation was sort of just uncovering and unpacking what was underneath Nancy, and physically working with Daryl as well to kind of create that intimacy and that play. But Em would say, like, you know, she can give you 100 different versions of any take. I mean, and so she was always like relying on me to make sure that we were putting it through the right path, do you know? Because she could do a really very fiery funny, and she'd say sometimes, you know, if you really drilled down, she'd be like, there were funnier takes. But she also knows that you have to walk a line with this kind of comedy. You can't just go there just for the humor. You have to be there for both. And so, and I felt that trust that she had so quickly. And that trust that someone gives you, someone like Emma Thompson, do you know, means that you can just be better at what you do. If someone is opening that door for you and wants you to guide them, then it's perfect. It's like everything we want in our careers, you know.
Exactly. And the word trust leads me directly into my next question, which is about the shooting of the sex scene. There's no hiding behind billowy curtains or undefined light sources in your sex scenes. This is a hotel room. We've been in the whole film and under the hotel room lights. Establishing that degree of trust, that working environment with your cast that ensured the sex in the film was as frankly portrayed as the emotions. It defines in you a great skill as a director, but also puts a lot of pressure on you as a human. You've got to be able to establish this in a creative environment. So it's quite the achievement. That, reflecting upon it, the relationship you had with these actors, and what I imagine was a fairly small but also very trusting crew. Yeah.
I mean, I have worked with Brian Mason, who shot and edited the film on all of my movies, and he's my partner as well. So there is a lot of trust going on. And Brian is kind of a part of the process of making these things work. He almost sometimes feels like another actor in those moments, and that's really important for this kind of material. You know, he moves the camera around them, they move around him, they're very close to him, do you know? And yes, the sets would be closed, meaning only a couple of people on at a time for a sex scene. But actually, they were really fun and enjoyable times, because Emma and Daryl had been doing massive amounts of dialogue every day and really having to, like, you know, maintain a kind of level of performance all the time, you know, for 18 days before we got to the sex scenes. And so by that point, they were like, oh, this is heaven. Here we are. We don't even have to speak. We just like lay here touching each other, and like they just thought it was so delightful. And it was a little bit different because we were filming long bits to just get little moments that I was trying to kind of find to capture for that last bit. And in terms of maintaining trust, like, there's a lot of stuff in the film about consent, but I think of working with actors on this stuff as being about consent too, which is that you require constant and enthusiastic consent all the time. And for me, that means that we can make agreements about our purpose and what we want the film to be, and therefore how far someone wants to go. I'm happy to be completely naked. I don't mind these parts on screen. You can touch me in these places. You know, we talk about that stuff. But that consent can be withdrawn at any time through the process is really important. That if they don't feel comfortable doing that, we just find a different way. Because you can shoot these things in so many ways, right? And we even had a deal that was like, even once we've edited it, when you see it, if there's something that you're like, it doesn't work, or I can't come to it, I don't want to see myself like that, you can take it out, and we have enough material to sort of shoot it show it in different ways.
Sure.
But they didn't want to, because, well, they really believed in why we would need to see bodies. You know, they're naked in terms of the sex, but they're also naked in very ordinary, normal ways. You know, that's when we really see them physically. And so that became quite important. And I think it was really important to us that we sort of started the film being very playful and coy about sex, kind of like, and a little bit of a riff on rom-coms, like, and then we cut away, you know, like just before they do it. And, you know, but I couldn't stay in that coyness with a film like this. We needed to like get to the point where we opened it up and we actually did start to see what it felt like. So we had it was an amazing process to create, and these two were fully in it with gusto. And I would check in with them annoyingly. Like, I mean, I checked in an annoying amount, but you have to, because
Yeah.
you do need to feel confident that they know what they're doing and are up for it and will always be up for it, you know. But yeah, we did workshops, and we spent the last day of our rehearsal, all of us getting naked and sharing stories about our bodies. And I didn't ever think that I would do something like that. But the film is about sort of trying to see your body as something other than how it looks, like trying to find the importance, you know, that isn't about its visual appeal. And so you have to kind of confront that in some way. And us getting naked together meant we were trying to do that together. We were like, here's my body and here's the purpose behind it, not here's my body and look at how it is visually to you. Kind of, it was a really amazing, interesting process.
It is so wonderful to talk to a director with such insight and candor about the process of directing it. So thank you so much, Sophie, for being here on screen, watching and providing us with some incredible insight. You've left me with a dry throat. I've got to go and have
yeah, it was such a pleasure to talk to you, Simon. Thanks for so many great questions.
No, congratulations on the film. All the very best.
Thanks. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
See ya.